Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another one of our guest speakers. I am excited to have with us today the phenomenal Ariana Boutain, who's joining us from Georgia, down in the South, y'all. So
Yes, I am.
tell us about what you're doing and where you've been and how you got into NDBIs. Just douse us with your knowledge.
Sure, yeah. So just a little bit about me. So I am a BCBA-D, and I have been in the field, not to age myself too much, but for almost 20 years now. I'm actually from Minnesota, so near Jamie's neck of the woods, originally. So I started doing in-home EIBI while studying psychology at the University of Minnesota for my undergraduate. And then I worked in the field as an ABA therapist for individuals with autism for about 3 years. And then went to graduate school at the University of Kansas, where I was able and fortunate to study under Doctors James Sherman and Jan Sheldon. And while at KU, my research interest and what I was involved in was really around skill acquisition at first. I compared different prompting procedures for my master's thesis, and then really started diving into parent training for my dissertation. So specifically, I did my dissertation on telehealth parent training in around 2014. So I was about 5 years, too early to that party, but was happy when telehealth did finally come on the scene, even though it was a result of a global pandemic. I'm happy that people could see what an effective, way to deliver services to often underserved populations that was. And then after graduate school, I moved to the Chicagoland area, and I worked in several different clinical leadership roles at a mid-size multidisciplinary organization that provided autism services in clinics in Illinois and Wisconsin. And then for the past year, I have been serving as the Chief Clinical Officer at Atlanta Autism Center here in Georgia.
Yeah.
And we are basically an early diagnostic therapy organization, and we specialize in play-based ABA along with NDBI and assent-based learning. So I am fortunate in my role to be able to oversee our clinical training, development, quality outcomes, and research here.
Oh, that's exciting. And I
Very
always
lucky.
think about you've been in it almost as long as I've been in it. So I think about your experience up in Minnesota, what were autism services like at that time? So back in the late 90s,
Yeah,
we
right.
come out
Yeah.
from Card to Iowa. And it was very much 10 trials,
Yeah.
drilling field, not really motivated. It was
Mhm.
very different. That was my
Yes.
exposure to ABA, psychology student intern, right, program to get extra credits. And so I have this really interesting journey towards getting into NDBI. So I always appreciate when our amazing guest speakers come on and share that kind of that compare and contrast.
Yeah.
What did it look like or seem like when you started out? Kind of how did you end up with NDBIs when you probably started out in a very similar type of ABA, like myself,
Yeah.
based on the region where you're at the time?
Yeah, definitely. When I first started in the field, it was very, the traditional ABA, everything was at the table. It was very
Mhm.
discrete trial instruction, very instructor led,
Yep.
focusing, on compliance. And I had taken like through my undergraduate work, like several courses in developmental psychology. The University of Minnesota has a huge developmental psychology program, so I was exposed a little bit, but I just kind of came into the field when it was just at a very different place. We weren't really talking about developmental milestones or best practice teaching procedures, depending on how old the kids were. It was kind of like that one size fits all DTT approach. So it was interesting because about 5 years ago, I think the field just had already started changing. And I think it was also changing quite a bit because around that time, Karen Pearson colleagues in like 2019 published an article, indicating that ASD can actually be diagnosed as early as 12 months,
Mhm.
where that diagnosis becomes considerably more stable at 14 months. But that was just such a big change because, earlier on in the field, 2, 3 years old was typically when kids were getting diagnosed. And so, soon after that, with younger and younger kids being diagnosed and younger kids starting ABA therapy, I really just started noticing some gaps in
Yeah.
our clinical treatment programs related to just assessing and teaching some of those really important, like developmental pre-learning to learn skills, like pre-joint attention, joint attention, and some of that early language engagement and play, where
Mm.
previously when kids were just older starting, a lot of it either had already been shaped up or it just kind of came along for the ride
Mm.
with targeting, some of those more VB math traditional able skills. So,
Yeah.
but seeing with our younger learners, that just wasn't really happening. So it just prompted me and my colleagues to really just dive back into the ASD literature, the developmental literature, just to see how we could better serve those children. And what
Absolutely.
I found, like, I had learned about like early start Denver model or ESDM actually while I was completing my dissertation on telehealth, because Lori Vismar and colleagues have really done some cool studies where they use telehealth to teach parents to implement ESDM. So then, years later, I kind of took another look at the ESDM research and assessments and curriculum, and also found NDBIs. So I came across the Schreibman, and colleagues 2015 NDBI paper that was just like paradigm shifting for me, as well as the NDBI Autism Spectrum Disorder Manual by Brunsma and colleagues that also just really helped shape the approach. Yeah, I know, I swear, I think it's in my bag right now. I carry it with me
Always close by.
all the time, and just coming through all of that, what I learned and I just love about NDBI is that, it's an empirically supported approach to serving young kids with autism, right? Which we want our, data and for our evidence-based practices.
Mhm.
And it involves learning through play, which is how naturally kids learn. And it just represents that merge between ABA and developmental science. And I just really think when you're serving those young early learners, that your treatment has to focus on utilizing both the science of learning in ABA, as well as those developmental research and milestones and teaching procedures to
Yeah.
obtain those optimal outcomes.
Yes. And I think about it having a young child at home who was
Mhm.
autistic, but also just a young child general, thinking about development and thinking about how we move things forward to supporting children. He's a child first and foremost. And you have young children that
Right,
have their own personalities and their
right,
own independent spirits and their own interest. And it's just a complex human being that we're raising, right? Like, and thinking
right,
about supporting them. And I look at a lot of the children and programs that I see that do not blend, like you said, the developmental and the behavioral, and a
right.
lot of the dysregulation in the behavior. To me, it looks like adults have these unrealistic expectations of what a child
Mhm.
should be doing. And maybe that child is 4 chronologically, but developmentally, they might not be. So, having a good understanding of autism and how autism impacts development and how we support early learning or early childhood education is such a pivotal game changer, right? Like, we
Absolutely.
bring that for the little ones, like a micro credential or a subspecialty. It is a different game to work with the little ones than
Yeah,
the older, in my opinion.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So having those programming considerations and thinking about skill development, foundational skills, behavioral cusps, and then training everybody is, yeah, it's pivotal. And I think it's
Yeah.
exciting you have the ability to do that at the
Yeah.
Autism Center.
Yeah, and really, as we came out of kind of that investigation, we were able to, develop an in-house assessment and programming guide, and it was fun for me because around the same time I have twins, and they were like 2 years old, right, when I was going through all of this research and development. So I got to actually see and watch them grow and develop and kind of see use these procedures, with them, just to teach them as I would, as a mom. And it just felt so much better. They just seemed to be having more fun versus when I would try to do like trials. And I was able to replicate the same thing at our clinic with our learners too, especially some of those early ones that were struggling with more of that traditional treatment model, more DTT treatment model. And the gains were just amazing. And the therapists all anecdotally said too, I love doing this. This is so much more fun. I feel so much better. And the outcomes were so much greater as well too, which was really cool to see.
Yes, I see the same thing. The progress and the catching up and that trajectory of the skills that are being acquired, because we have attention and motivation and engagement. If you think about that in any aspect of life, if we're motivated, reinforced, engaging, you're going to do more, have more exposure, be more interested in it. And it just seems to track really
Yes.
well with the young children.
Mhm.
Like, why have we not been doing this? And
Right.
for me, it was
Right.
just I kind of stumbled upon it as I went to my old school EIBI DTT. And then I got into verbal behavior, and then I stumbled into
Mhm.
and then into
Yes.
ESDM, and then NDBIs kind of as a whole, looking at all the different models. And so I'm
Yes.
always curious people's journey of how we get here and how can we get people here faster. And there are
Yeah.
characters like yourself who are putting out some amazing work. And but is there a focus at the university on our
Mm.
NDBI getting into course? Like, how do we get that knowledge out there now that we have it? We have textbooks available. How do we make that shift happen a little quicker? Or like you said, is it kind of grassroots where you're at the clinic, we're a model for this, and then other people can
Mhm.
see it and implement it? Because I haven't been supervising people in a while, but I don't know of any course sequences that bring in development or NDBIs to an
No, you're right. You're
AI.
right. And I think too, we definitely need more research. We need more clinical applications of it. And something we just actually started a research program here at Atlanta Autism Center where we have a research review committee. We can support on-site research. So something we're really wanting to do is do some more empirical studies
Mm,
on NDBI and comparing it particularly to assent and assent withdrawal, just to be able to get more literature and research out there to hopefully have the field follow. That would be my dream. So hopefully we're working towards that one step at a time.
yeah. And then when you guys support the training at the center, Ascent is built into that, and Ascent withdrawal, like that's kind of trickled all the way down to technicians. Can you
Yes.
share kind of what that looks like, or some of the key points or difficulties you might encounter from staff who are new to this NDBI type version? They're coming from somewhere else, right? I'm sure that you
Yeah.
encounter that.
Yeah, we definitely spend quite a bit of time during training. So we talk through, our teaching procedures, which are all very rooted in NDBI with following the child's lead and modeling language, imitation, joint control, all those things. And we also have a universal assent protocol at AAC that we train all of our staff on that talks about, how do we assess assent and assent withdrawal? How do you still safely set boundaries when you need to, right? Those hard no's, and respond to challenging behaviors as a result of that. And really making sure that, we take a lot from Hanley too, and make sure that everybody's focusing on teaching their clients within HRE,
Mm.
making sure they're in that happy, relaxed, and engaged, making learning fun, finding activities that the child likes, and finding ways to sprinkle in teaching during those preferred activities and natural routines.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that I feel like NDBIs, they're just HRE all the time. Like,
Right.
how can you
Right.
not happy, relaxed, and engaged when you use the strategies that we use within the field? That's why I just giggle when I think about supporting strengths and strength-based neurodiversity, right? I feel like that's just NDBIs in general,
Yes.
getting people
Yeah. Like
just
NDBI, Ascend, compassionate care, today's ABA, like they all are working together. And it's very harmonious. So I
that
always,
they're
we
orbiting.
definitely incorporate all of those different approaches and
Mhm.
principles into our clinical practice.
Do you have challenges or do you encounter challenges when you hire staff that come in from a different background? Are they receptive to a child-centered or child-led approach? Or have they been trained in other ways where they don't like this and they want to do it? I know you get to screen who you get to hire,
Yes.
so I'm sure you might not get as much of that, but have you encountered that before your screening procedure?
Yes. Yeah. So now we definitely do screen for that in the sense that, we say, hey, this is our approach. These are our values. This is what teaching looks like. Here's why. Just to make sure that that's kind of in line with where they're at clinically and what they want to be doing therapeutically. But when we rolled this out, because we definitely had to, over the past year, roll this out to our staff, there were people, based on their history that struggled a bit more with the acceptance piece a little bit. We were able to, just through continued conversations with them, get them on board, but the implementation piece more so for some individuals, because it's harder, right? Like, it's not, DTT is easy. You can objectively define, task analyze. Here you go, you sit down, here's your cards, and I'm at the table and I control the environment, and it's easy, right? But
Yeah.
NDBI, I think it's more fun because you get to be creative, right? You're thinking on your feet. You're like, okay, what are we going to play with? Oh, cool. All right, we're playing with the dollhouse. Yeah, we're playing. Oh, how can I? Oh, I bet I can throw in a tacting trial here, and so you have to be on your toes. But you also need more of that clinical judgment that takes a little bit of time to teach and to train. So we definitely had to spend quite a bit of time more with some staff than others, but really just a lot of modeling, a lot of support, BCBA support, feedback, and now we just build that in a little bit heavier on the new hire training side.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I remember being DTT trained, again, the table, this beautiful instructional control, right?
Yes.
At the table, my cards are here, my reinforcers, my token board, the kids here. And I still see children, pinned against the wall, like they're pinned against the wall. And I think, oh, I know why you're doing it, but it just looks horrendous.
Yes.
So thinking about what makes it so hard when we move to the natural environment, this big language-based learning environment that we all live in. And I remember training staff, okay, go. And they would just look back at the table,
Freeze. Yeah.
like the unknown from the Lion King, like the dark, like, you want me to go there? And I'm like, I want you
Yeah.
to take the goal and I want you to go there and find something to incorporate it, integrate it. And they just, deer in headlights, just lost so much slow walking to get it over to there. Is it okay? Should I do just the clinical decision-making skills, like
Yes.
on your toes, was just for some people an issue. Other people, I feel like it was more of an energy. I want to just sit here. I'm tired, been at this for hours. This is so much
Yes.
easier for me. This, you want me to run and chase and follow. So I think it depends on the person and their training. And like you said, that acceptance or their viewpoints of
Yes. Yeah.
can't do or won't do, just like for children, is it a can't do, a learning to do, or a won't do skill?
Yes.
So I framework it. And I think the same thing for people who are coming into NDBIs.
Mhm.
Don't want to do this for whatever reasons. You are trying to learn how to do this, and in that growth period, which is, growing pains, or you don't have the skills to do it, and because you've never had any exposure. And so I'm always,
Yeah.
yes, when we get people,
Definitely.
if
And
they,
one of the things that we found to be a barrier for some people was how to play with a young child, right? Is because that wasn't really something that you focused on in kind of a more traditional DTT ABA model. And so we really developed the training so that it started with them just playing, right? Like, don't worry about running any trials, like just focus on being engaged,
like,
following the child's lead, imitating the language, imitating the actions, having that shared control, that balanced turn taking. So that's where we started. And then we started talking about how to run those trials. But another barrier is, at least in Georgia, 90 to 95% of our clients are funded by Medicaid, which requires an RBT certification. And so as part of that RBT certification, the task list is very much more straight DTT, right? So I think it's challenging because we do have a BT training program where people come in brand new to the field.
okay.
We put them through a whole 4-week training to become RBTs. And so we have to focus for them to pass the exam and their competencies on these more traditional DTT procedures. So for them, it takes even more time to kind of shift into the NDBI we start with DTT and then go to NDBI, but it's something we've been talking about. Like, do we switch it around? It's an empirical question, because that can be a challenge too. So it's almost like, hopefully over time, we can get the task list, even for RBTs, to incorporate more naturalistic, more NDBI procedures as well.
Absolutely. I was talking with Sophia D'Agostino, and she's got an article about, towards a deeper understanding of NDBIs and how to get NDBIs into the task list. And I think the talk at the NDBI conference is about supporting BCBAs and getting NDBIs into a task list course
Oh,
at the
awesome.
university. So we had talked about that. How do we make that shift happen when the RBT competencies and expectations are not really aligning with that? And I
Right.
can't tell you the number of people that have asked, could you do a 40-hour RBT course? Heck no, I don't have time to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot to have that there. But if there were enough people that had a need for it to have that, I think that'd be a wonderful thing. But it goes back to, how do we align it? And would something on that test or exam shouldn't be conflicting, right? It's a sign, right?
Right.
But would it be,
Right.
oh, no, they want you to take data or graph it like this, versus we also take data. It might just look different or graph different, but it's still
Mhm.
meaningful and relevant. So I always sit and think about these questions with the guest speakers. How could we tackle that? Or how do we make the circle fit in the square peg? And why is it a square peg? Why are they not
Yes.
blending together when we support the young children or older children, child-centered, following
Yes.
leisure interest, older, again, for me, 7, 8, 9-year-old? Why are we not also incorporating and implementing these strategies with that population, who again might
Yes.
chronologically be 7 or 8, but developmentally not? And that's why I love some of Hanley's stuff with like HRE and Ascent. I feel like for some of the older kiddos as well, people are starting to organize
Absolutely.
for today's ABA. And I really feel like that's a nice segue to NDBIs, to almost walk backwards for some people.
Right, right. I know it brings me back to before NDBI was even a thing. Like when I started doing in-home, I started doing just EIBI in-home, and then I started working with a little bit older kids, and I had a high school
Wow.
kid. He was like 17 years old, and I would go to his home, and he loved Chucky movies. Like he was like horror movie, like total fan. And like, it was really hard to pair with him. Right here, I'm like this, like 19-year-old girl coming in, like, I'm going to teach you stuff. I'm your ABA therapist. Right. But the only way I was able to even run these, like, and it was more like higher level, like social pragmatic programs, was we were watching Chucky, and I would be like, oh, like recall questions, be like,
Mm,
oh, what house did he go to before this one? What was dad's name? Like, I would have to incorporate, like, basically use, NDBI within this, very non-DTT format,
mm,
and kind of, make learning fun, or else he's like, you are not going to sit me down and start asking me these questions, in this DTT format. But it was super effective, and it was a way to teach him these skills within the way that he wanted to learn.
mhm. Yeah, and that's so helpful. I think I always think about ABA providers because that's, where I hang out, but I think about other auxiliary providers, OT, speech, PT, early intervention providers. And prime example, we had an assessment for Liam the other day, a speech assessment. No toys in the room, sit him down, flip card from some assessment, drill and kill at the table. He was good for about 10 flips, and then he started humming and singing. And I had told her, he does well with play-based, and their whole thing,
Yeah.
play-based, were, the whole lip service, if you will, was like, that's not what they do. So I
Mm.
said, can we change something up? Well, we have to do this for insurance. I understand that, but you don't have to do it that way. You don't need to sit and drill at the table. We could have him come tell me and whisper and come back and tell you the name of the thing. And so I
Mhm.
did that for a few rounds, and he did brilliant. And then she's like, sit down. And I'm like, back to drill. And I was like, okay, I think other professionals would benefit from NDBI strategies and that
Absolutely.
conceptualization as well. Because that went on for a good 20 minutes, and then dysregulation start. I'm like, here we go. I can see the signs coming, and the signs were coming because it was drill and kill 25 minutes. I'm like, I couldn't sit there if you drilled me for 25 minutes in a chair where my feet don't touch the floor. There's no toys. There's nothing in the room.
Right.
Right. So I
Right.
always think ABA providers, but I think what we can do with NDBIs is to really kind of support other professionals who also support young children. But my mind never goes there. I always think ABA providers first.
Right. Right. Well, there's still so much work to be done there. But definitely, I think the possibilities are endless and the reach is really endless too.
Yeah. Are you guys a multidisciplinary? Do you have SLPs and OTs with
Yes, so
diagnostic?
we have partnered, yep, so we partnered with a couple different agencies here to offer speech and OT at the centers. And I will say one of the first questions I ask our partners and our providers is, what's your approach to therapy? Like, we are very play-based. Like, I make sure to sit in on sessions to make sure they're aligned with that approach, because I feel like it's just as applicable in speech and OT services as it is in ABA.
Yes, and I never think about it that way. I always feel like speech, they're friendly, demanding request. I just think about that perception, but then I look at it, I'm like, that does not track for most of the
Yes.
providers. So I
Yeah.
love, like you said, the reach for NDBIs.
Mm,
And I just sit back and think, do you have any advice for professionals, either that are multidisciplinary that you partner with, or just in general for how to integrate NDBIs into a practice, organization,
yeah.
training program? Because it sounds like you guys are doing this very well.
Yeah. And I've had to do it a couple times. And I think,
Okay.
the biggest thing is if it, depending on how familiar you are, or if you're not, like the first thing is just diving into the literature. I mean, I
Okay.
think it's just really diving into, the NDBI literature, like that, the 2015 article, like I mentioned, the NDBI manual,
Mhm.
just attend as many trainings as you can. There's so many, since COVID, like CE opportunities are just so much more available now. And there's a lot of really good NDBI ones out there. And I really found that the ESDM training, I did the introductory training. It was all online, all web-based through the UC Davis Mind Institute. I found that really helpful, more so for like the teaching procedures and how they talked about that and the examples. And I've even shown, our staff jars, like what is that? It's just a way to structure those interactions a little bit more for staff that are struggling to figure out ways to incorporate teaching within play. And just learn as much as you can, and then become an expert before you train the rest of your organization. And then kind of how I approach it is, then I really just started identifying what assessments and teaching procedures I felt like would work in the organization that I was at. And then starting with the BCBAs, like
Mhm.
pouring into your BCBAs, really training them to fluency, using like a behavioral skills training approach, really making sure that they are bought in to the approach, and that they're super comfortable, fluent, not only doing it, but assessing and programming for it, and also training their RBTs, right? So once they're trained, then have them be a part of that RBT training, and really just building in that high rate of support, supervision, definitely initially, but also ongoing, just to provide, that multiple exemplar training. And I think NDBI is unique too, because unlike DTT, everyone kind of has to develop their own style, right? Because if the therapist isn't having fun, even if it's a child preferred activity, the kid usually isn't having fun after all. So they kind of have to find things like, like I have one staff member that's really into superheroes. So he just finds the coolest ways to engage with one of his clients that like superheroes, where, somebody else on the team is like, I have no idea who that is. I don't know why he's wearing that. I got no idea. Right. So you kind of have to find your own flow too. That just takes time and support from your supervisors.
And I love that, just to kind of unpack that a bit more, like talking about what's reinforcing for the therapist is just as important as what's reinforcing for the child, and trying to get those relationships and establish that connection or engagement, because reinforcement is a two-way street, right? It can't just be,
Yes.
I'm doing this and the kid is having fun and I'm not getting any reinforcement back, because we know those behaviors won't maintain over time. So I appreciate you pointing that out, to say, trying to align those interests and work on those relationships. As autism is a social disorder marked by social differences, right? Social is engagement, social is other people, social is common interest or shared interest. So I think
Yeah,
that's a really
definitely.
great point to think about, how our staff being reinforced for the things that they are doing, so it's meaningful for them, that they don't have burnout, and that they are engaged and excited and happy to come to work with these children.
Yes,
Appreciate that
definitely.
very much. Any advice for how to stay up to date on trends, literature, like you said, those amazing CEU events.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, there's really been like in the past couple years a
Mm.
really significant increase in just the NDBI related webinars,
Mhm.
on social media, making sure,
Mhm.
any NDBI groups or even ABA groups. There's a lot of really great continuing ed opportunities through there. And even at conferences, we were just at the the most recent WEBA conference, the Women in
Mhm.
Behavior Analysis Conference, and they had some great NDBI talks there that were super helpful. And podcasts. I mean, I am in my car, I travel around between our different clinics and I listen to podcasts, and there are so many really great ones on NDBI, on behavioral observations,
Okay.
on ABA Inside Track, the Autism Helper podcast. There's a lot of really great episodes out there. So I would encourage people. That's just an easy way. You're already going somewhere, right? You're going to work. You're usually by yourself.
Uh-huh.
It's just a great way to kind of download that information and just learn from some really great speakers more about NDBI.
This has been so wonderful. I am so excited that you're here. I'm going to link the center's website. If there are any resource, I'll link the podcast place spots that you just talked about. Those are brilliant. And some of the research. If there's anything else that you think might be helpful,
Sure.
you'll Ascent, if there's any research out there, Ascent NDB, I think that would be great to link. I
Yes.
don't know of any off
Yes.
my head, but I'm sure there probably is. If
Yes.
you send that to
Yeah.
me, I will throw a link up there for that. Or if you want people to
Perfect.
reach out to you, I can put your contact info up
Yes.
there.
Please, please, please share my contact information. And like I mentioned, we're definitely looking to start some NDBI research projects. So if anybody is interested in partnering on any research or NDBI research, please reach out. I'd love to chat more.
Absolutely. I can't wait to post this episode. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It was a pleasure.
All right.